The smartest people you know are the ones lying awake at 2 in the morning replaying a conversation that ended 9 hours ago. You call it insight. You call it being thorough. You call it caring more than everyone else in the room. Schopenhauer called it something colder, a sentence. Not a punishment you did something to deserve, a sentence you were handed the moment your mind got sharp enough to see what duller minds get to ignore. It doesn't feel like a sentence when it's happening. It feels like diligence, like vigilance, like the price of being the responsible one. Tonight you find out exactly which sentence you're serving, how long you've already served without knowing it had a name, and whether there is any version of parole available to you at all. Right now, in this exact minute, your mind is running a background process you never signed off on. It is scanning every room you enter for threats that were resolved years ago. It is replaying a silence from a text message as if silence were an accusation. You call this being careful, being responsible, being the one who sees what other people miss. But the invoice is arriving daily, and you are paying it in a currency you cannot see on any bank statement. Rest, real rest, not sleep. Sleep you get plenty of, restlessly. The kind of rest where your mind stops auditing you for a single hour. Schopenhauer diagnosed this 2 centuries before your phone existed to make it worse. He said the mind that thinks too much does not get wiser with age. It gets more efficient at manufacturing its own suffering and duller at feeling anything that isn't a threat. This is not a video about calming down. Calming down was never the missing piece. This is a video about what your restlessness has been protecting you from the entire time, and why, given the choice, you keep selecting the pain you already understand over the peace you have never once tested. You have built an entire identity around being the vigilant one, the one who plans 3 steps ahead so nothing catches the room by surprise. Nobody warned you that vigilance, run without an off switch for enough years, quietly rewires what your body considers a normal resting state. Ask yourself honestly what an ordinary Tuesday evening would feel like with nothing scheduled, nothing to solve, no one to monitor. If the honest answer is discomfort rather than relief, that discomfort is data. And it is the first data point this video is going to make you actually look at. Hold that discomfort in mind. Do not resolve it yet. You will need it later, once you understand exactly what it is made of and why it keeps returning on schedule. Here is the assumption you've been quietly running your whole adult life on, that a restless mind is a defect. Something to medicate, meditate, or simply outwork until it goes quiet. Schopenhauer inverts the entire premise. He argues that restlessness is not a malfunction in your perception of reality. It is the single most accurate reading of reality that a human mind is capable of producing, and that accuracy, not some personal failing, is exactly why it costs you so much. In his book Studies in Pessimism, Schopenhauer wrote a line that should be printed on the inside of every high achiever's eyelids. Life swings like a pendulum backward and forward between pain and boredom, not one then the other, resolved, both, permanently, on a loop. And the sharper your mind is, the faster and more violently that pendulum swings, because a sharp mind runs out of distractions faster than a dull one does. You were taught somewhere along the way that intelligence is a reward, a gift that makes life easier to navigate. Schopenhauer says it is closer to a tax, deducted automatically, the moment you started perceiving the world with more precision than comfort requires. Comfort, it turns out, has always demanded a small, deliberate amount of not looking. You were never the one who couldn't relax. You were the one built to see too much for relaxing to work as advertised. 4 laws govern the specific mechanics of this. Once you see them operating in yourself, you will not be able to unsee them again. That is not a warning, it's a promise, and it's the entire reason you clicked on this. Each one will cost you a small, specific illusion about yourself. Each one will also hand you back something more useful than comfort, an accurate map of exactly where the pendulum swings hardest in your own particular life. Law 1. The pendulum you call a mind. Bold claim first. Your mind does not actually want peace. It wants stimulation, because to an overactive nervous system, peace and boredom register as the exact same signal, and boredom is the second half of Schopenhauer's hell. You've lived the proof of this 1,000 times without naming it. The itch to check your phone the instant a task ends, before the satisfaction of finishing has even had a chance to land. The physical inability to sit in a parked car in silence without reaching for a podcast, a call, anything with a voice in it that isn't your own. That itch is not curiosity about the world. It is an exit sign lit up in your skull. This happens because your mind treats stillness itself as a threat signal, an unpatched vulnerability. Without an external problem to chew on, it manufactures internal ones on command. Old arguments replayed with better comebacks. Disasters that haven't happened yet rehearsed in full. Failures you're already grieving in advance. Anything, absolutely anything, to keep the engine from idling. Here is what you do about it starting today, not next month. The next time the itch to fill silence hits you, wait 90 seconds. Set a timer if you have to, not as a punishment and not because silence is virtuous. Do it to watch, with genuine curiosity, what your mind reaches for first when it believes no one, including you, is monitoring it. And here is the turn, the part that should sit uncomfortably. You do not actually fear boredom itself. You fear precisely what surfaces the instant the noise finally stops. And the mind that will not shut off has never once, not a single time in your adult life, let you find out what that thing actually is. Every device you own was engineered, deliberately, by people who understood this exact vulnerability better than Schopenhauer's readers ever did, and who built entire business models on making sure your 90 seconds never arrive. That is not paranoia. That is simply the current economics of your attention, and it means the pause is no longer a small act of self-discipline. It is an act of resistance against a system designed specifically to prevent it. Law 2. The porcupine's distance. Bold claim, the exact same mind that keeps you sharp is the one quietly keeping every person in your life at arm's length and calling the distance independence instead of what it actually is. Schopenhauer illustrated this with porcupines huddling together for warmth on a freezing night. Close enough to feel the heat, they wound each other with their own quills, pull apart to stop the pain, and they freeze instead. He used this, without softening it, as his working definition of human intimacy. You have lived this exact mechanism. The relationship you kept just far enough away that it never had to be truly tested by weight. The friend group you observe carefully from one half step outside rather than one you actually belong inside of. You told yourself more than once that you simply preferred it this way. This happens because a restless, highly perceptive mind notices every flaw in another person faster than it can generate the forgiveness required to stay close through it. Closeness means sustained exposure to those flaws, and worse, exposure to your own flaws reflected back at you with no polite distance left to hide behind. Here is what to actually do, starting today. Pick one specific person. Give them exactly one piece of information about yourself that you would normally, instinctively edit out before speaking. Not everything about you, one piece. Then simply notice, without judgment, how hard your own body resists doing it. And the turn. Your solitude was never a genuine preference, however sincerely you've defended it in your own head. It is a quota system, recalculating in real time the exact distance at which you stop absorbing damage and start absorbing loneliness instead. Reset daily, without ever once asking your permission. The cruelest part is that the people you've kept furthest away are usually the ones who would have handled your quills better than you assumed, and you will likely never find out, because the whole design of the distance is to make sure the experiment never gets run. Schopenhauer himself lived out this exact law almost as a case study, famously solitary, famously difficult to get close to, and famously precise about naming a dynamic he could describe far more easily than he could personally escape it. Law 3. The price of seeing through the veil. Bold claim. Your empathy was never simply a pleasant personality trait you happened to be born with. Schopenhauer would call it accurate metaphysics, and accuracy, it turns out, is one of the most expensive things a mind can own. He argued that the felt separation between you and every other person around you, what he called the principium individuationis, functions like a dream that most people simply never wake up from. Compassion, real compassion, happens the exact instant that dream cracks, and you feel another person's pain register as structurally, literally your own, not merely observed from a safe and comfortable distance. You already know this feeling intimately. A stranger's visibly bad day somehow ruins the rest of yours. A friend's crisis sits heavily in your chest for days after the phone call has long since ended. You absorb entire rooms that other people simply walk straight through without a second thought. This happens because the perceptual boundary you maintain between self and other is measurably thinner than most people's, and it was never a flaw in your defenses to begin with. It is the total absence of a wall that other people never once had to notice they were quietly leaning their whole weight on. Here is your practical move, starting today. Name the feeling out loud or silently before you let yourself fully absorb it. Say to yourself, this is their weather, not mine. Not to stop caring about people, to stop drowning every single time you do. And the turn, the part nobody warned you about. Your sensitivity was never weakness dressed up convincingly as a virtue for other people's comfort. It is precision, plain and simple, and precision left permanently unshielded will bleed you out slowly across the rest of your life if you let it keep going unchecked. Schopenhauer's own ethics, unusually for his era, placed compassion above rules and above duty, precisely because he believed it was the one honest proof that the wall between self and other was never as solid as it looked. He simply never mentioned what it costs the person doing the perceiving. Consider how differently you would treat your own exhaustion if you stopped calling it oversensitivity and started calling it what it actually is, an accurate instrument, doing exactly what an accurate instrument does when it is never given a case to switch off, ever, for anyone, including you. Law 4. The will that never signs a treaty. Bold claim, and it is the coldest one yet. You are not chasing your own goals. Schopenhauer's answer is far less flattering than the one you've been telling yourself. Something considerably older than your ambition is chasing you straight through them, and it never once stops to collect its own winnings. He called this force the will, a blind, ceaseless striving that runs underneath every single want you have ever consciously had. It does not care in the slightest what you actually achieve. It only cares that you never, ever stop wanting something next. You have felt the exact crash that follows a real win, the promotion that already felt like nothing at all by Friday afternoon, the relationship you fought hard for that went quiet somewhere inside you within a single month of getting it, not because any of it wasn't genuinely enough, because, according to Schopenhauer, nothing was ever built by this force to be enough for very long. This happens because satisfaction was never designed by the will to last beyond a brief lull between one craving ending and the next one already loading in the background. That gap is so short that most people never even notice it as a gap. Here is what to do, starting immediately, the very next time you win something that matters. Do not reach for the next goal right away. Sit inside the flat, empty feeling for 10 full uninterrupted minutes. Let it be boring on purpose. That specific boredom is the will itself, impatient, quietly waiting on your very next command, ready to hand you a new craving the moment you let your guard down. Fine days. And now, the turn. And this is the climax of everything you have learnt across this entire video tonight. Perception is leverage. Distance is a decision. Suffering is information. Master those 3 sentences completely, and you stop being driven blindly through your own life. You start driving it yourself, for what may be the first time. Schopenhauer himself never claimed you could defeat the will outright. He only claimed you could occasionally step far enough outside it to see it operating clearly, the way you might watch weather from indoors instead of standing in it. That brief distance is not freedom. It is the closest thing to freedom this particular philosophy is willing to promise you. Now turn every single one of these 4 laws directly onto yourself, because that was always the actual point of tonight, not the philosopher, not the history. You have read someone's silence as a personal rejection when it was never about you at all. You have stayed deliberately distant from people who had genuinely earned closer, and quietly called that distance strength to make it easier to live with. You have won something real and felt almost nothing by the following Tuesday, and told no one how strange that emptiness felt. You have absorbed a total stranger's bad mood on public transport and carried it all the way home like it somehow belonged to you personally. You called this empathy. It was also, quietly and consistently, exhausting you in ways you never fully tracked. You have mistaken the reflexive itch to check your phone for simple curiosity about the world, when it was always, every time, the unmistakable sound of your own mind refusing to sit still long enough to actually hear itself think clearly for once. None of what you just recognized in yourself makes you broken in any meaningful sense. It makes you exactly what Schopenhauer spent his entire life trying to describe on paper, a mind precise enough to finally see the whole mechanism clearly, and honest enough, right now, in this exact moment, to admit out loud that it has been running quietly inside you the entire time. This knowledge is for protection, not destruction, not for reading other people more accurately than they'd like. For finally, after everything, reading yourself accurately for what might genuinely be the first time in years. The pendulum does not simply stop because you now understand how it works. It only stops swinging quite so violently once you stop pretending you were never the one standing on it in the first place. You will still check the phone. You will still keep certain people at exactly the distance you've always kept them. You will still feel someone else's bad day land in your own chest before you've had time to build a wall against it. The difference now is that you will recognize the mechanism while it's happening instead of mistaking it for your entire personality. So what do you actually do with all of this? Not fix yourself, because Schopenhauer never once offered anything resembling a cure. Only clearer sight than you had walking in. What you can genuinely do is stop mistaking these 4 patterns for your fixed identity and start treating them instead as weather systems you can track and eventually predict. Track the itch right before you feel any silence. Track the distance you instinctively keep from people who have already earned closer. Track whose pain you are quietly carrying home that was truly never yours to carry in the first place. Track the flat, empty feeling that follows every single win you spend months chasing. Do this consistently, and the mind that will not shut off stops being a life sentence you're quietly serving without parole. It becomes, instead, the single sharpest instrument you have ever owned, finally pointed in a direction you actually chose for yourself. If tonight described more of your own life than you expected walking in, that was never an accident. Subscribe, and every single week we go one philosopher deeper into the exact mechanisms already running underneath your own daily behavior. The full extended breakdowns, the additional case studies, and the ad-free versions of everything live on Patreon, linked below, and it directly funds the research that keeps this honest instead of easy. One last thing before you go anywhere tonight. Of the 4 laws, the pendulum, the porcupine, the veil, or the will, which one did you recognize in yourself first, before I had even finished saying the sentence out loud?